The wealthy cowboy had ridden this land for over 30 years, yet that morning felt different, like the prairie itself was holding its breath. The sun crept low over the horizon, casting long amber shadows across rolling grasslands that seemed to stretch into eternity. His name was Caleb Hart, a man whose fortune was whispered about in saloons and ranch houses, alike thousands of acres, prize-winning cattle, oil rights beneath the soil. Men envied him. Some feared him, but very few truly knew him. Caleb was not born rich. Every inch of his empire had been earned through bloodied hands, sleepless nights, and sacrifices no ledger could record. That morning, as his horse slowed near the far boundary of his land, Caleb noticed something he had never seen before. An old cabin, half collapsed, crouched among dying cottonwoods like it was trying to hide from the world. The cabin looked abandoned at first glance. Its roof sagged under decades of wind and rain. The door leaned crooked, barely hanging on its hinges. Smoke should not have been rising from its stone chimney, but it was thin, gray, real. Caleb narrowed his eyes. Nobody lived out here. This stretch of land was considered cursed by some locals. Too far from town. Too wild, too unforgiving. He dismounted slowly, instinctively resting a hand near his belt, though he wasn't expecting trouble. Wealth had taught him caution, not cruelty. As he stepped closer, he noticed footprints in the dirt. Small ones. A woman's boots, worn thin. He knocked once on the door. No answer. The wind sighed through the trees. Caleb hesitated, then gently pushed the door open. Inside, the smell of burning wood mixed with damp earth. The cabin was barely furnished. A rough table, one chair, a cot patched together with old quilts. And there, standing near the stove, frozen like a startled deer, was a woman. She was thin, her face pale but proud, dark hair pulled back loosely. Her eyes met his, not with fear, but with a quiet readiness, as though life had already tested her far worse than whatever this stranger might bring. "I don't want trouble," she said first, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. Caleb raised his hand slightly, a universal sign of peace. "Neither do I," he replied. "Didn't know anyone lived out here." The woman studied him closely, taking in his fine saddle, well-kept boots, the calm authority in his posture. "Most folks don't," she said. "That's why I'm still alive." The words hung heavy between them. Caleb glanced around again. No sign of luxury, no comfort, just survival. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then answered, "Eliza." Caleb learned quickly that Eliza lived alone. No husband, no family nearby. She had come west years ago with promises that died quicker than hope. The land was harsh and the world harsher still. As she spoke, Caleb noticed her hands, calloused, scarred. The hands of someone who worked not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin walls. Caleb felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Pity, respect, or guilt? He had everything. She had almost nothing, yet she stood unbroken. "I won't bother you again," Caleb finally said, stepping back toward the door. "But this land, it's dangerous to live alone." Eliza met his gaze without flinching.
"So is living anywhere else," she replied.
Caleb paused, then nodded slowly. As he mounted his horse, he glanced back once more at the cabin. Smoke still curled from the chimney, stubborn and defiant. He rode away, but something in him had shifted. All day, the image of that cabin haunted him. That night, as Caleb sat in his grand ranch house surrounded by polished wood and soft lamplight, the memory gnawed at him. He thought of Eliza's thin blankets while he slept in comfort. He thought of her isolation while he dined among workers and guests. Wealth had never bothered him before, but tonight it felt heavy, unearned in comparison. By dawn, Caleb had made a decision, one that would change not only Eliza's life, but his own in ways he could never have imagined. Before the sun rose fully, he saddled his horse again. This time he carried supplies, tools, food, and a resolve stronger than steel. What Caleb Hart would do that day would echo across the plains and leave everyone who heard the story stunned. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when Caleb Hart rode back toward the forgotten edge of his land, his horse's hooves thudding softly against the cold earth. The prairie looked the same as it always had, wide, silent, indifferent, but Caleb was not the same man who had ridden away from that cabin the day before. His saddlebags were heavy with supplies, flour, dried meat, coffee, blankets, tools, medicine, Yet heavier still was the weight in his chest, a restless pull he could not explain. He had spent a lifetime building wealth, measuring success in acres and numbers, but none of it had prepared him for the quiet dignity in Eliza's eyes or the stubborn way smoke had curled from that broken chimney as if daring the world to extinguish it. As the cabin came into view, Caleb slowed his horse. For a moment he wondered if he was overstepping, if his presence would be seen as intrusion rather than help. Wealth often carried arrogance without meaning to, but then he noticed the door open, Eliza standing outside, an axe in her hands as she split firewood. Her movements were efficient, practiced, each strike measured. She noticed him instantly, her posture stiffening, not in fear but caution. When Caleb dismounted, she didn't speak right away. She simply watched him, eyes sharp, weighing his intentions. "I said I wouldn't bother you again," Caleb said, breaking the silence. "But I lied to myself." Eliza frowned slightly. "People usually don't come back unless they want something," she replied. Caleb nodded. "That's fair. But today I'm here to give." He untied the saddlebags and began laying supplies on the rough ground. Eliza's expression shifted, not to gratitude but confusion. "I didn't ask for charity," she said firmly. Caleb met her gaze unoffended. "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering respect. Nobody should survive out here with nothing when there's enough to share." Eliza crossed her arms, studying the food, the blankets, the medicine. Pride warred with necessity in her eyes. Finally she spoke. "You don't even know me." Caleb smiled faintly. "I know enough. I know you're strong. And I know this land nearly killed me once too." That caught her attention. She tilted her head slightly. "You?" she asked. "A man with boots like that?" Caleb chuckled quietly. "Once upon a time I slept under wagons and ate whatever I could hunt. Lost more than I care to remember." For the first time, Eliza's guard lowered just a fraction. She allowed him inside. The cabin looked smaller in daylight, its flaws impossible to ignore. Wind slipped through cracks in the walls. The roof sagged dangerously. Caleb's experienced eye cataloged every weakness instantly. This place wouldn't survive another hard winter. As Eliza brewed weak coffee, Caleb offered to fix the door hinge. She didn't argue. Soon, the sound of hammer against rusted metal filled the cabin, followed by silence thick with unspoken thoughts. As the hours passed, Caleb did more than he planned. He repaired a broken window, reinforced a beam, stacked firewood. Eliza watched him work, wary but grateful, though she never said the words. At one point she spoke softly. "Most men who ride out here think they own the world." Caleb wiped sweat from his brow. "Most men are wrong." She almost smiled, but stopped herself, as if afraid hope might betray her. By midday, clouds rolled in, dark and heavy. Caleb knew a storm was coming. One of those sudden prairie storms that tore through everything, without mercy. "You shouldn't be alone tonight," he said carefully. Eliza stiffened. "I've been alone plenty of nights," she replied. Caleb nodded. "I don't doubt it, but this one's different." He glanced at the roof. "This cabin won't hold." Eliza's jaw tightened. "Then it won't," she said simply. That stubborn resolve struck Caleb harder than any storm ever could. He made a decision then, not impulsive but inevitable. "You won't be alone," he said. Eliza turned to him sharply. "What does that mean?" Caleb inhaled deeply. "It means I'm not leaving. Not tonight, and not like this." Silence stretched between them, heavy as thunder. Finally Eliza spoke, voice low. "If you're here out of pity—" "I'm not," Caleb interrupted gently. "I'm here because I remember what it feels like to be forgotten." The storm broke just before sunset. Rain battered the cabin, wind howled through the trees. The roof groaned under the assault. Water dripped through cracks. Caleb worked tirelessly, climbing onto the roof in the rain, reinforcing weak points while Eliza held boards and tools, shouting warnings over the roar of the wind. They moved like people who had known hardship their whole lives. No wasted motion, no panic. When the storm finally passed, the cabin still stood, battered but alive. Exhausted, they sat inside by the fire. The silence now felt different, not tense, but shared. Eliza stared into the flames. "Why do you care?" she asked at last. Caleb didn't answer right away. "Because one day," he said slowly, "someone cared enough to help me. And I've spent years pretending that didn't matter." Eliza swallowed hard. Outside, the prairie exhaled after the storm. That night, as Caleb prepared to leave, Eliza surprised him. "You can come back," she said quietly, "if you want." Caleb smiled, something warm and unfamiliar settling in his chest. "I will," he said, and as he rode away under a clearing sky, he knew this was no longer just an act of kindness. It was the beginning of something far greater, something that would challenge everything he believed about wealth, power, and what it truly meant to save a life. The prairie was unusually quiet the next time Caleb Hart rode toward the old cabin. No wind, no birds, just the slow creak of his saddle and the heavy rhythm of thoughts he could no longer silence. Days had passed since the storm, but the image of Eliza standing in the rain, unbowed, unbroken, had followed him everywhere. Meetings with ranch managers felt hollow. Profits meant nothing. For the first time in decades, Caleb realized something terrifying. He had built an empire, yet somehow lost sight of why he ever wanted it. As the cabin appeared through the trees, Caleb noticed something wrong immediately. No smoke from the chimney, no movement. His chest tightened. He dismounted quickly, calling out her name. "Eliza." No answer. He pushed the door open and froze. Eliza lay on the cot, pale and barely conscious. A fever burned through her, her breathing shallow. Infection. Exhaustion. The storm had taken more from her than she'd let on. Caleb moved instantly, every ounce of experience taking over. He gave her medicine, cooled her skin, fed her water slowly. Hours passed. He stayed all night. For the first time in years, Caleb Hart was not a wealthy cowboy, not a landowner or a legend, just a man praying silently that he wasn't too late. By morning, Eliza's fever broke. When she finally opened her eyes, she found Caleb asleep on the floor beside her cot. She stared at him for a long time before whispering, "You stayed." Caleb woke, relief flooding his face. "I told you," he said softly. "You're not alone anymore." Later that day, Caleb made a choice that shocked even himself. He told Eliza the truth about his wealth, his land, his influence. Then he said the words that would change both their lives forever. "This cabin, this life, it's killing you. Come with me." Not as charity, as family, as an equal. Eliza sat in silence, tears forming despite her strength. "I don't belong in your world," she said. Caleb shook his head. "Neither did I until someone gave me a chance." Weeks later, the old cabin stood empty but not forgotten. Eliza moved onto Caleb's ranch, where she helped manage land, livestock, and people with the same resilience that once kept her alive alone. She didn't become dependent. She became powerful. Together, they transformed parts of the ranch into shelter for widows, injured workers, and people society had discarded. Caleb's wealth didn't shrink, it finally had purpose. Years later, locals would tell the story differently. They'd say the wealthy cowboy rescued a woman from a cabin, but those who truly knew the truth understood something deeper. A woman who refused to give up reminded a powerful man what being human really meant. And on quiet evenings, when the sun dipped low and the prairie turned gold, Caleb and Eliza would sit side by side, not as savior and survivor, but as two souls who met at the edge of nowhere and found everything.